A lot of people say that you should spend less than you make and save or invest the difference. But exactly how much should that be? Keep listening as we give our take on how much to save or invest at different income levels. Hello, and welcome to the Wealth Minded MD podcast with your money best friends. I'm Dr. Alicia Taylor.
And I'm Dr. Brittany Helford.
And of course, we're here to help you build wealth and make good money decisions so you can create the life you desire with more control over your time.
Before we dive into the episode, I want to take a moment to highlight a financial planning company that really impressed me. Bonafide Finance. Alicia and I recently met with the founder, Ben Martnick, and let me tell you, his approach to financial planning is different in all the right ways.
Yeah, that's right. Ben doesn't just want to grow your money. He wants to make sure your investments actually align with your life goals. And if that wasn't good enough, Ben is not only a certified financial planner, but he's also one of the smartest people I've met. He is the go-to for student loan strategy and tax planning, two areas most advisors overlook, especially for high-income earners. Ben is one of the only people I know that can actually do the calculations to help you figure out if you should file your taxes separately or jointly with your spouse, and also tell you how it might impact your student loan payments. Plus, him and his team will also file your individual tax returns for you and provide tax strategy throughout the year.
What I also love is he's fee only. So you always know exactly what you're paying for, and you don't have to worry about his company selling you products or charging you extra fees or commissions.
So if you want advice that's honest, strategic, and tailored to you, check out bonafidefinance.com/wealthmindedmd. Him and his team specialize in helping doctors and high-income earners build their net worth in all the right ways. Email him today at hello@bonafidefinance.com, and don't forget to tell him we sent you.
Well, Alicia, as always, stalking your Instagram. I know what your schedule is because we have to coordinate for the podcast. So I already know where you are. But then I'm like, what is she doing where she is? So tell us, where have you recently traveled to and what fun did you have in that location?
Yeah, so I went to California. I went to LA and Anaheim, which is kind of like a little bit like South LA. And I went there because we had a conference. So the family medicine, one of the main conferences each year is in the fall, and it's usually in a different city. This year, it was in Anaheim. And for those who don't know, Anaheim is where Disneyland is in California. And so it was really interesting because the convention center and all of the like conference hotels were like walking distance to Disneyland. And so you could see all the little families with all the kids dressed up, them walking to the park in the beginning of the day, and then everybody looking exhausted and tired at the end of the day. But it was cute kind of seeing the magicalness, if you will, and happy families. I got a chance to see some of my friends from residency because they happened to go to the conference as well. I even made it to an NFL game. And so I just had this fun 5 or 6 days-ish in California. So it was lovely.
Yay. And I love that you double dip, right? Because it was a conference. So you got your education in, you're using your CME. For those of you who don't know what CME is, Continuing Medical Education Fund. So usually our job will give us some money to go to conferences to continue our education. And Alicia used that money, I'm sure, to pay for some component of this conference. And then she used the extra time to enjoy. I love it. So, we went to Disney World, I guess, in Florida, not the actual one. We just went to Animal Kingdom because I was like, I don't have the energy for Disney World. So we went to Animal Kingdom in Florida. It was very nice, but I also thought, I should have invested in this fast pass. We should have paid for the fast pass so we didn't have to stand in line because we didn't get to enjoy the entirety of the park because the lines were long. And so I'm always trying to balance because we are higher income earners, like how much do we do for our kids? What type of experiences do we create for them? Because I also don't want them to be spoiled. They're not always going to be able to pay for a fast pass. And so the experience is different when you can afford to pay for more of the luxuries. So tell me, did you went in the park? Did you pay for the fast pass? Did you get on all of the rides? What was your experience like?
Yeah, yeah. So, Disney World has like 4 parks, of which Animal Kingdom is one of them, but like you said, the main park is probably the one where most kids are. I think it's Magic Kingdom. I think that's yeah.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
then there's Epcot, and then it used to be called MGM Studios back when I was a kid. I think they renamed it since then. But Disney World has 4 parks. Okay, Disneyland in California has 2 parks. So there's the Magic Kingdom version, and then there's Disney Adventure Park, which has more of the rides, if you will. So our passes, which came included in the conference registration, how fun is that?
Very
Yes.
nice.
So the conference actually said conference activity, bonding, wellness, however you put it. It was included in the registration. And so we all got Disney tickets and we got Disney evening tickets. So it was like the full day because the purpose is you're supposed to learn during the day. Hello, we are using our CME correctly. But then in the evening, you could go to Disney. And so we got access to one of the parks. You could pick which one, I think, after 4 p.m. And the parks didn't close until 11 p.m. So I'm saying that to say I didn't have like all day at the park, although 4 to 11 seems like a long time to me. It was
Mhm.
to my feet, at least. So anyway, I had already been to Disney Adventure Park because I used to live in LA. So I'd already been there, but I had actually never been to like the Magic Kingdom Park. And that's where a lot of the conference attendees were going. So this was actually my first time into that side of the park, if you will. And that one doesn't have as many rides, not as many rides for like adults, maybe like 5, maybe main rides. Disney is like you're eating and you're trying different foods and they have entertainment throughout the park, almost like a parade and different things like that, right? So it's a whole like Disney experience, but it's not like you're going to Six Flags and you're riding a bunch of rides and roller coasters, if you will.
Mhm.
So that being said, there weren't a ton of rides.
I
And
see.
so even though the lines were long, if you're only trying to ride like 3 rides and you're there for 8 hours, it's like, okay, I could wait in line.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
that being said, towards the closing of the park, there was this really cool ride that we had not ridden before. And we went up to the people in charge of like checking people's tickets and fast pass, and he was telling us about the ride and saying, "Oh, it's so amazing, but there's this other ride too you should try, but you may not be able to try both." And we're just chatting him up. And then eventually he was like, "You know what? I'm going to let y'all in the fast pass line." And so he lets us in the fast pass line. So I got in the fast pass line, although I did not pay for said fast pass. Thank you, Jesus. And I saw the difference. We were walking through, there was no stoppage. We were in and off that ride in like 10 minutes versus the ride wait time, when you're like in Disneyland or it'll
Mhm.
tell you like estimated wait time. It was like 60 minutes.
Yes.
And I was like, I don't know how much the fast pass is. I can see how being able to save time would be very valuable. So I hear what you're saying about the fast pass.
So I think when we do the full on Magic Kingdom experience, we'll probably invest in the fast pass, but we can't spoil our kids. I appreciate that you as an adult identified there are only a few rides that you actually wanted to ride and you were there. You could just relax, not feel rushed, enjoy conversation with people. Hopefully it wasn't too warm. You made it worthwhile. And so that's all part of the experience. And I love that for you. Now, you said you went to an NFL game. I'm like, what NFL team is it? California.
You're so funny. You're so funny because LA has 2 of everything. So you actually had a better chance of guessing. They have 2 NFL teams, they have 2 baseball teams, they have 2 basketball teams. I went to the LA Chargers game.
Okay. See, I would not have thought about any
The
Chargers.
Chargers. There's also the LA Rams, but I did not go to that game. I went to the Chargers game, one, because they were playing there, right? So part of it is like which team is playing when I'm there. The other part of it is I used to work for UCLA and UCLA has a partnership with the Chargers.
Mm,
So just the ability to kind of like experience the stadium and text some of my people from fellowship and that sort of thing. But I went to a Chargers game, which was fun. Even if you're not into football, I think that stadium is so cool. And it was fall in California. And so it was still pretty warm during the day, but cool at night. For those who haven't been to California, it was like low 60s, high 50s at night, but it was 80 in the middle of the day. That's kind of how
mhm.
California is. And so that was the weather, but it was a lovely experience. I like sports, as everybody knows. And so I had a great time at the game. Just being able to catch up with my co residents, go to Disneyland. I was surprised by how much Disneyland costs. I'm somebody who travels a lot, and I had just gone to Disneyland in Tokyo when I was there. And might I tell you, the price difference was striking. Obviously, my admission into the park was included in the conference registration. But from what I'm hearing from other people who actually paid out of pocket, it's well over $100 to even enter the park.
Mhm.
And then the food in the park is really expensive. When I was in Tokyo, you could get a whole roll and sushi and all of that for like $3. In California, it was like, it would have probably cost like 15 for the
Mhm.
equivalent. So I was just struck by like how expensive an entire pizza for a family was $90. That's how expensive we're talking. So anyway, I could talk all day about expenses. I will spare everybody who's listening to this podcast, but I will just say I did have a fun time. Thank you that I was able to combine CME, so learning for my job and getting new information about different treatments and management of different things was really cool. But being able to combine that with a vacation, I love doing. And that's a hack that I try to take advantage of. Anytime there's a cool conference in a really fun city, I'm like, ooh, this is a chance for me to turn a work trip into a vacation.
Yes, yes, yes. I appreciate that too. We always try to double dip as well. All right. Well, Alicia, let's talk about our financial focus for today. And I am excited to engage in this conversation about how much we should have saved at various income levels. Whenever we have these money conversations, it always puts a mirror to me saying, am I doing enough? Am I saving enough? Because I consider myself a good financial steward, but there is always room for improvement. Let me tell you. So lead us through this conversation. Why did you think that it was really important to talk about this topic today?
It's really interesting, but anytime I'm driving in my car, I'm a podcast person, so I do listen to podcasts. And although they span a wide range of topics, some of the podcasts are finance related. And there was a podcast from a different show that I was listening to that brought up this topic of how much people should have saved at different income levels or by different ages. And I thought to myself, well, I don't know if I would have actually fit into that because of my trajectory as a physician, right? Because we went through a lot more schooling than the average American. And then there's this period of training where you're not making as much. And then you become an attending, and all of a sudden you're making a lot more, and then you can save a lot more. And so I just felt like for the typical advice that is given for the average American, oftentimes that doesn't necessarily align well with physicians. And so I thought it might be helpful from two physicians like us to kind of talk to our audience about how much we think that maybe people should be saving at different income levels as they're in different parts of their career. People talk all the time about not spending everything that you make and saving some money. And that I think is very general advice that is applicable to almost everybody. But sometimes I think it's really helpful to have concrete advice like, okay, you say I should be saving, but how much? People kind of want to know, am I doing good? Am I keeping up track? Or maybe should I be doing more? Is it okay for me to save a little less and spend more? And so giving people some guidance, I think, could be really helpful as well.
Well, I'm excited to talk about this because I'm looking at the script here, people, and I'm like, okay, I think we might have some varying opinions. So lead us through where you think, especially we're talking about not only physicians here, and this is what I love, right? We're not only talking about physicians, we're talking about income levels. So whether you are a physician or a nurse practitioner or physical therapist, anybody else, lawyers, whatever, you work in a trade, then this episode is applicable to you. So if you're listening to this, then share this with your girlfriend, your male friend, whomever, because these are metrics that anybody can reach. Okay, Alicia, now take us through the first step. So what are some of the things that we must consider in understanding how much we should save, what some of the challenges are? Let us know.
Yeah. So I think initially the purpose may be, all right, I know that I should save, but what am I saving for? As I answer that question, it would be, okay, number one, an emergency fund, right? You never know what may happen. So you want some money set aside for a rainy day. But for those who may already have that set aside, then it might be, okay, well, what else should I be saving for?
Mm.
And for me, that means paying down debt, saving for a large purchase, being able to invest money and build wealth over time. And so when I say the word save, I actually mean having some money in cash, but also having some money invested. So I'm using the word save as kind of like a catch-all term for money that you do not spend and you're utilizing for some other purpose, usually for the purpose of building wealth or increasing your net worth. And so what are the different ways that you can increase your net worth? You can save money in cash, you can invest money, or you can pay down debt. And so when we're talking about you should be saving X amount of dollars or you should consider saving X amount of dollars, that's what we're meaning. You should be using this percentage of money to pay down debt, to invest, or to build up in cash. And so those are some things that I'm always thinking about when I'm thinking about, all right, how much money am I saving? I usually tell people to reserve about 20% of their take home pay for wealth building, right? 20% of what you get deposited in your bank account each pay period, saving 20% of that for wealth building, for paying down debt, for investing, for building up your cash reserves. But I've realized that again, that's general advice, but that might seem impossible to some people, especially those who are in residency or in training, right? If you're only making $50,000 a year, it's pretty hard. It could be pretty challenging to save 20% of your take home pay. On the flip side of that, if you're an attending physician making $500,000 a year, you could probably save much more than that and still be fine. And so I think sometimes that the general advice isn't as applicable to everybody in their unique circumstances. So I too am excited to kind of delve into this. People in their late 30s, early 40s may need to spend a little bit more on childcare. So maybe they can't invest as much. Maybe some people in middle age are prioritizing college planning for their kids. On the flip side, those in their 50s and 60s, maybe you can save more, but maybe you don't need to save more. Maybe your retirement is already funded. And so why don't we go through, Brittany? I thought it would be cool for us to go through these different income levels and kind of have a discussion about how much you or I think that people should consider saving at these different income levels. And obviously, we're two different people, as you mentioned, so we might have different opinions, which I think is really helpful for people to hear my perspective and your perspective on this. All right, let's start off with somebody who maybe is just getting started in their career. Maybe they just graduated from college or just finished grad school and they're taking some entry level position in whatever field that may be. And maybe that entry level position at this point in their life pays them around $50,000 a year. I think most residents are paid a little more than that nowadays. I think the average residency salary is probably like 60 or 65,000, but let's say it's 50,000, right? Let's say you have a salary of $50,000. If somebody has a salary of around $50,000, once they pay taxes on that money, and the amount they pay in taxes could vary. It could vary based on if they're married or not, if they have kids. But let's just say on average, if you're an unmarried person and you make around $50,000, your take home pay each month or every 4 weeks or so might be a little over $3,000, give or take. How much of that, Brittany, do you think that someone who's making that amount of money should be setting aside to save each month?
Yeah, Alicia. So I think that this is a great point. And I want to just highlight something that you said is that when we're talking about savings, this is money that you're not spending, right? So that savings can go towards investing, it could go towards your emergency fund. I recently had a conversation with some of the cardiology fellows who are definitely making more than 50,000 here. I recommended that they should at least aim for 15% at minimum. And one of the reasons why is because where we are in Boston, it's a higher cost of living. So they might not be able to reach that 20% mark, as you said, depending on life circumstances. So let's at least shoot for 15%. That metric is what at least historically some of the other data has showed us as far as like fidelity, how much people should be saving at various income levels. And this is not necessarily someone that is just in the high income bracket. So at minimum 15%, and then try to figure out how you could save more. Now, how you save that money, that's for a whole different topic. But that's what I would encourage someone at this income level to save.
All right. So you think about 15%. So in this case, if someone has a salary of $50,000, are you saying 15% of their take home pay or 15% of the 50K salary, like the gross or the net?
Because they're at $50,000, I would say it would be the net because I would encourage them to put some money in a Roth IRA instead of contributing to a 401k. But it depends if they have a match. That's why I said how you save that is going to be a little bit different. So if you have an employer match, then you want to contribute up to what is required for that match at this income level because that is going to be free money. And we know 401k, depending on how you contribute, sometimes there are Roth 401k options through employers. I would encourage that you at least contribute up to that match. So at this level, I would say max out that Roth option. But if you don't have a Roth option and it's pre-tax, then you want to max out the pre-tax amount. So sorry not to have a direct answer to your question. I think it just really depends on what options are available. But if you do not have a Roth 401k at your employer, then a portion of that is going to be pre-tax and not necessarily just what you're taking home.
All right. So I think what I hear you say is that if someone is making $50,000, you think that they should be saving or investing 15% of that in some sort of employer sponsored retirement plan, whether that's a Roth 401k or pre-tax 401k. This is where we differ. We're different already. I think that if someone has a salary of $50,000, they're probably struggling to make ends meet as is. So I personally don't think it's realistic for somebody who's making $50,000 to invest 15% of their income. I think trying to do 5% or even 10% is a good goal for somebody that's only making $50,000, especially when we consider that they're only bringing home a little over $3,000 per month. I mean, rent for most people is like over half of that. Then you're factoring in food and transportation. They probably don't have that much left over. I personally think that at lower income levels, it's really hard to save because so much of your money is just going towards basic living expenses. So my advice would actually be to try to save 100 to $300 per month. I think at that income level, it's probably hard to say, let's start investing. I think people should really just focus on building an emergency fund at that stage because any emergency could probably derail them in their finances. And so just trying to save in cash $100 to $300 a month until they build up a decent emergency fund is probably where I would start. My advice might differ if it was a person that was middle aged or older, in which case then the need to really save for retirement is there. But I think if someone is young-ish, late 20s, early 30s, they're just getting started in their career, they're only making about $50,000 a year, trying to save 5 to 10% of their take-home pay is a decent goal. And I think it should actually be in cash first to build up that emergency fund. So we differ there. You're like, do the 401k, do the 15%. I'm like, these people are looking at you like, girl.
I think it is individualized, right? All of this is going to be individualized. I agree with what you're saying is that you want to make sure you have an emergency fund so that you don't get into trouble. But what I find is even at lower income levels, if you don't create the habit of saving and if you don't try to push it, then you allow your expenses to rise up to whatever you have remaining, like you have no money left. And so I think even at some of the lower income levels, and again, it all depends on a person's situation. So they should still try to push their savings. I appreciate your differing income. So start with Alicia's suggestion and then work up to mine, I guess. We'll see. Give us some feedback, people.
I agree with you that building that habit is really important and being able to put, even if it's just 1% into your employer retirement plan, builds that habit. I just think it's a little bit difficult to do on $50,000. But let's go to that next level. Let's go to 75,000. This is where I think a lot of residents and fellows may be around the $75,000 mark. Now, I bet you there's a resident listening going, girl, I am not near 75,000. I'm still in the 60s, and that's okay. But let's say you're around $75,000. If you have a $75,000 salary and you are an unmarried person, let's say your take-home pay is around $4,400 per month. In my opinion, I think at that income level, it probably is much more realistic to put some money into your employer-sponsored retirement plan, into your job's 401k or 403b or what have you. And so my advice would be at that income level, trying to kind of double dip and put maybe about 5% of your salary in your employer-sponsored retirement plan, like a 401k, or if you decide not to do that and you want to use a Roth IRA instead, then that's fine. But about 5% of what you make into some sort of retirement plan, whether it's a Roth IRA or a 401k, and then also trying to save around $300 to $500 per month in cash, and using that cash to build up your emergency fund and pay off any high interest credit card debt. So that would be my advice. So if you're making $75,000, putting 5% of what you make into your employer sponsored retirement plan, and then saving in cash around $300 to $500 per month to build up that emergency fund. What do you think about that, Brittany?
So one of the things that I would say is I think historically the number to save for your emergencies has been $1,000. I would actually say that most people need more than that to bear their emergencies. So I would recommend that you have an emergency fund of about $2,500. At that point, I would always recommend anyone who has a match through their employer. Maybe most residents and fellows don't have a match. It depends on how things are built out. You want to get the free money that is available to you. If you are in residency, if you are in fellowship and you have a match through your employer, then my suggestion would be to invest up to that match and to try to choose a Roth option at this income level, especially if you are someone who expects that your income is going to increase. So whatever that match is, and then the difference, I would recommend putting the difference in a Roth IRA, but really making sure that that emergency fund is adequate. And I would say the adequate amount is $2,500 for the emergency fund. Now, I like that you have this $300 to $500 per month saved. So let's say I have a question for you. So after they put their 5 to 10% in their Roth IRA or their 401k, where should this $300 to $500 be saved? Are you thinking that maybe they should invest in a taxable brokerage account or they should do a high yield savings account? What would be your recommendation if they say like they don't have any credit card debt? So this is like money that's really going to be saved elsewhere.
All right. Your question for me is, Leisha, if you're saying invest 5% into their Roth IRA or their 401k and save $300 to $500 per month, what are they doing with that $300 to $500 per month that they're saving? Okay. My personal experience with a lot of people that I talk to that are around this income level is they do have credit card debt. My advice for them, I think, is to Start with the emergency fund, then go to the debt, then finish off the emergency fund, and then start saving even more. So let me explain this. You talked about, how some people say an emergency fund is $1,000 and you recommend $2,500. I'm sure some people listening to this have heard that emergency fund is supposed to be 3 to 6 months of expenses. So they're probably wondering where you even got the $1,000 or the $2,000. And so let me explain this. I believe, and I think that you probably align with me on this, is that there's actually two tiers of emergency funds. There's a bare minimum emergency fund, and then there's like a true emergency fund. And what we're talking about with that 1,000 to 2,000 is the bare minimum emergency fund. That's an emergency fund that will literally cover your deductibles. You get into a car accident, most of us have a car deductible, right? The amount we have to pay in cash before the people actually agree to fix our car. And that amount might be $500 or $1,000, right? So you got to have at least that much saved so that if you get in a car accident, you could pay your deductible. Most of us have health insurance that comes with a deductible. If we get into a car accident, we need to go to the hospital and we're in the hospital for days, there's a certain amount we have to pay in cash and before our insurance even kicks in. And so you want to make sure that you have that kind of amount in this like initial emergency fund. Your tire goes out, make sure you can buy new tires. Your laptop goes out, you can buy another laptop. Your cell phone dies, you can buy another phone, right? That's kind of like your bare minimum emergency fund. And that amount back in the day, people thought should be $1,000. Now, you and I kind of agree that amount might be closer to $2,000, but that's that bare minimum emergency fund. So with this person with the $75,000 salary that's saving ideally $300 to $500 per month in cash, I'm thinking, all right, build up that $1,000 to $2,000 bare minimum emergency fund. Step one, check. Next, I think they should be paying off high interest credit card debt. And my experience is a lot of people at this income level have credit card debt. Now, it may not be $20,000 of credit card debt, but it might be $5,000, it might be $3,000, it might be somewhere in there. And so I would say paying off high interest debt, like credit card debt, like a car loan that might have a high interest rate, or a personal loan. Once they pay that off, then I'm thinking building up that true emergency fund of 3 to 6 months of expenses. In my experience, when I was making that income level, as there was always things coming up in my life that I did not plan for and I did not expect, I was using that emergency fund as I was building it up. Sometimes it didn't seem like the number was really moving. You're like, well, what should they do once they already built it up? I'm like, girl, I never got to that point. I don't think a lot of people making that income are at that point. And for me, when you're at that income level, sometimes it can be hard to splurge and do things like take a vacation without accumulating credit card debt or without derailing yourself financially. And so I would say that if somebody at that income level is at the point where they have their baby emergency fund of $1,000 to $2,000, they paid off all their credit card debt, and they built up a true emergency fund of 3 to 6 months of expenses, I would say, hey, and take the rest of that money that you're saving. If you got a little extra at the end of the year, plan a vacation, live your life, have fun, splurge a little bit, because oftentimes it's hard to do that on your normal paycheck. So that's what I would tell them to do.
I do think that there's a lot to say about enjoying your life at any income level, not to put yourself in a financial stress or financial strain, but making sure that you're not just saving and investing and paying down debt and that's it. I recently had a conversation with someone and I was like, girl, do you think that God just sent you to work to pay down debt? He also wants you to experience some of the joys that exist in this world. So Alicia, I wholeheartedly agree with that. And as I'm reflecting on this episode, I'm thinking about, okay, when I was in residency, what was I able to do? And I guess I am very blessed and privileged that I didn't have any credit card debt. I am blessed and privileged that when I transitioned to residency, I had family who was able to support me, and we just rented a U-Haul and we packed and moved everything ourselves. But I know that everybody's not in that situation. So I'm really appreciative that you bring up some of the challenges that people face, because everybody is at a different level. When I was in residency, I had no credit card debt, and then I was able to save at least $8 to $9,000 to pay for our wedding. But again, not everybody is there. Not everyone has that support and that ability. I also lived in a low cost of living area, and I was very intentional about how I spent my money. Y'all know I'm frugal Franny. So I chose the cheapest place in the safest neighborhood where I could walk to work, and did potlucks and didn't go out to eat and all these things. I don't feel like I led a life of drudgery. Like, I still enjoyed life, but I was very intentional about my spending. So at every income level, I think it requires intentionality, especially at these lower income levels. The choices that you make, making sure that you're spending wisely and spending on joy, will allow you to get to the next milestone in your finances. And Alicia, I appreciate that you're recognizing some of the challenges that people face.
Yeah, I did my residency in Atlanta, where I live now. The cost of getting an apartment that was one bedroom by myself, I didn't necessarily love the roommate situation. And in Atlanta, there's always concerts. People are always inviting me out to brunch. Okay. So that money, I was spending it as it was coming in. Okay. So I felt very proud of myself as I was able to eventually increase the percentage that I put into my 403B at the time and increase the percentage each month that I was able to save in cash. But girl, I was not trying to do much more than that. Okay. Anyway, let's go up to $100,000. All right. Let's say you're making $100,000. If you're an unmarried person, again, this changes if you are married or have kids, but if you're an unmarried person making $100,000, your take home pay might be a little over $5,500 a month, including if you were able to contribute to your job's 401k or 403b. Let me explain this a little bit. I believe at the income level of $100,000, once you start making around $100,000, I really do think it's realistic to at least put 10% of what you make into your job's retirement plan, right? 10% of what you make into your job's 401k or 403b. I think that's a very realistic goal. And if you were to do that, right, if you make $100,000, you're a single person and you put 10% in your job's 401k or 403b, then your take home pay, even after you do that, will still be over $5,000 per month. And I think for that person, it's probably realistic for them to try to save an additional $500 to $1,000 per month in cash. I know some people are listening to this like, girl, you've gone crazy. But I really do think that someone at that income level of $100,000 salary should be able to put 10% into their job's 401k, 403b, and then save an additional $500 up to $1,000 every month in cash. And there's a range because if you live in a low cost of living areas, you mentioned that you did when you were in training, you might be able to save in cash a lot more versus somebody who lives in a high cost of living area. They may not be able to save much more than that. But I think at that income level, that is what someone's goals should be. And answering your question from earlier of where do you put that money? Well, first, you're trying to build that bare minimum emergency fund of around $2,000. You're paying off any high interest credit card debt. You're building up a 3 to 6 month emergency fund. And then I think if you have anything left over, you really should be putting that into a Roth IRA. For at $100,000, I think it's realistic for somebody to put some money in their job's retirement account, put some money in a Roth IRA, and save some money in cash.
Yeah, I do believe, and I agree with you, that there's an order in which your money should flow, right? First, you do have to have that emergency savings because that's going to prevent you from accumulating any other debt. And those who are challenged by debt, then paying off that high interest debt first is a must because nothing is going to return like 22% like paying off your high interest debt. So, Alicia, I wholeheartedly agree with that. I think contributing up to your 401k match is required because that is free money, right? So you don't want to leave that free money on the table. And as you have highlighted, Alicia, it's not going to really change your take home pay. When you're thinking about how much you need in emergency savings, the 3 to 6 months is a good metric, but I would argue sometimes that we don't actually need all of the 6 months, right? So you want to look at your disability insurance. What is the period of time before your payouts kick in? And usually you have 90 days, right? You have this 90-day period before you can start to receive the payouts or the benefit from your disability insurance. So if you have very few dependents, if you have no one who's relying on you and you have a pretty good safety net, for many years, we only had 3 months because for me, it's like, okay, I have all of this money sitting in cash and yes, it is in a high yield savings account, but how much is it actually doing for me or working for me? So I think the amount that people actually need, of course, we have 6 months now because we have 2 children, et cetera. We have multiple homes, businesses, et cetera. So we have a bit more cushion, but I don't think everybody actually needs that cushion. And for many years, we didn't have the 6 months. And I would say instead of just saving, if after all the debt is gone, that I would push up maybe contributing to your 401k or at least get that match and then max out your Roth IRA and then maybe go back to that 401k and see what else you can add. Another element that I would add at this level, Alicia, is a healthcare savings account. If you have access to one, then or maybe prioritizing some funds into that because it is triple tax advantage, meaning that it's pre-tax. You put that money away, you can invest it and you don't pay any taxes on any of the investments, any of the trades and sales purchases of the investments. So now no capital gains tax or anything like that. And when you pull it out during at the time where you're going to need it and use it for qualified healthcare expenses, at that point you pay no taxes. So I just wanted to introduce, if someone has a healthcare savings account, then that might also be something that you can contribute to at this point. Instead of taking that $1,000 and saving it in cash, figuring out, okay, how can I potentially maximize some of the other investments and save on taxes at this level?
All right. I hear what you're saying. I think we differ a little bit because I think $100,000, while it is not a small salary, I still don't think it goes as far as it used to. For me, it's like, all right, they make $100,000, putting 10% into their job's 401k, 403b, I think is great. And then saving in cash $500 a month up to 1,000, I think is great. You know, if we're saying people should have a 3-month emergency fund, how much is that 3-month emergency fund? That's probably at least 10 grand, if not more. So there are people like, look, I didn't get past that point. You talking about maxing out a 401k, a Roth IRA, a HSA. They're like, where's this money coming from?
But okay, so at this level, let me clarify. I would put up to the 401k match at your job, and most jobs don't require 10%, but get the full 401k match and then use a Roth IRA or contribute to an HSA. I wouldn't necessarily max out a 401k at this point because I think it has some limited investment options if you are trying to do all of the things. But again, I think it depends on what people have access to. And I agree, we still want to make sure there's some money in the bank for them to enjoy life, Leisha. So don't get me wrong. I'm not saying invest and save everything, right? But I hear what you're saying. But I also think that making sure that you're diversified and starting to think about tax strategy and utilization, if you have really good options for HSA, 401k, and the Roth IRA, could be beneficial at this level.
I hear what you're saying. I don't know anybody that makes $100,000 and has a 3-month emergency fund in a high yield savings account and is contributing 10% to their 403b or 401k. I don't know. I mean, granted, I'm not saying that my experience is the end all be all. I'm just saying that usually I hear people doing 401k or 403b plus a Roth IRA plus an HSA at 200,000, like when they become attending physicians. So maybe you are in a different position. Maybe your friends saved and invested a lot more than my friends. That's fine. I'm just thinking like you're saying invest in your 401k or 403b up to the match. I'm saying put 10% in there regardless. Tomato, tomato. That's not that big of a difference. We're both saying you should have some money in cash that you're saving as well each month. I think that should go to build up that 3-month emergency fund. And then you can think about a Roth IRA or an HSA. And I don't think you are deviating too much from that either. You're just saying, hey, start to think about these other accounts, which I think is great. So let's go to that next income level. Well, maybe they can start, in my opinion, doing something with something else. So let's jump a little bit more. Let's go to $150,000 salary. And this salary, I would say, is somebody who maybe isn't a physician but still has a high-paying 6-figure job. Maybe you're a lawyer, maybe you're a physician assistant, maybe you're a nurse practitioner, or maybe you are a physician in that transition year where half of the year you are a resident or a fellow, and then the other half you're going to be an attending. So you're going to spend some months making sort of a lower salary and some months making a higher salary. And maybe when you add those months together, maybe your total take-home pay for that year would be around $150,000. Or maybe you're a pediatrician and you're doing outpatient work and that's just what your salary is. And so for a salary for $150,000, I think at that salary, it is realistic, as I mentioned before, for somebody to put 10% in their job's retirement plan, whether that's a 401k or a 403b or the TSP if they're in the military, putting 10% in your job's retirement plan. And if you do that, if you're an unmarried person, your take-home pay will be around $8,000 per month. If you're married, you'll probably take home a little bit more. But your take-home pay at that level will be around $8,000 per month, even after you put 10% into your work retirement plan. And I think with a take-home pay of around $8,000 per month, then someone should also be able to save in cash around $1,000 to $1,500 per month. All right, so this is the Leisha talking. That's how much I think somebody that's making around $150,000 a year should be able to save in cash. And then what do you do with that cash? Again, that bare minimum emergency fund of $2,000, paying off any credit card debt or high interest debt that you have, making sure you have at least 3 months in your emergency fund. And then after that, somebody at that income level can do one of two things: put some extra money in their work retirement account, or put some money into a Roth IRA. I don't know if they'll have excess money to do an HSA on top of that. But if you're frugal Franny like Brittany is, maybe you do, and maybe you can do that. But I think bare minimum emergency fund, paying off high interest debt, building up the 3-month emergency fund, and then you have a choice, in my opinion, of putting more into your work retirement plan or putting money into a Roth IRA. What do you think, Brittany? She's looking disappointed.
I'm not looking disappointed. I appreciate what you're saying here. I agree that you want to make sure that you continue to invest in your work retirement plans, but also evaluate which plans will work for you. 401k sometimes have higher fees and you're delaying it's tax deferred versus tax free. And so that's where I think we differ a little bit, is that I probably would diversify a bit more of how I'm contributing. And perhaps I wouldn't put the full 10% in a 401k if that's all I had to contribute to the retirement plans. If there was a healthcare savings account that was available to me. And again, if you're young and you're healthy, then a high deductible healthcare plan isn't going to be cheaper on the front end. It shouldn't be more expensive when you go because you wouldn't be using healthcare. But tomato, we a little bit different in our approach here. But I don't think that I would put all of the money just in one single basket. I would definitely make sure that the high interest credit card debt is paid down. I would probably lend a little bit more on the 3 months end of the emergency fund, depending on how many dependents you have. Now, if you have 2 children, if you have a home and all of that, then definitely you want to have your 6 months. But then I would max out a Roth IRA before I put any more money back into a 401k. Honestly, that's what I would do.
Okay. All right. We are not that far off in this one. So let's keep it moving because that
Okay,
doesn't
let's go.
happen often. Okay. All right. Let's say we've got somebody who is an attending physician or entrepreneur, lawyer, whatever. You've got a high paying job. You're at the point where you're now making multiple 6 figures. And let's say we're at a salary level of around $200,000. So this is maybe some of the primary care docs that are starting off. Maybe they make more than that. But let's just say we got a salary of around $200,000. I think at this salary, again, somebody can easily put, in my opinion, 10% into their job's 401k or 403b, right? 10% of their income into that account. And then if they were to do that, if you're an unmarried person, your take home pay is around $10,000 per month. If you're married and you have kids, then your take home pay might actually be more than that because you would pay less in taxes. But let's go with the conservative amount of $200,000 salary. Let's say 10% in your work retirement account. And now you're taking home on average around $10,000 per month. I think that person can save $2,000 a month, $1,500 to $2,000 a month. All right. And I know some people that are at this income level and maybe they're saving a lot more, but I think $2,000 per month is a good goal. And I also think at this income level, that person can also have a separate fund, like a vacation fund, where maybe they're saving an additional $500 or $1,000 for an upcoming vacation or for a large purchase. But I would say $2,000 per month for wealth building. And what do I mean by that? I mean, having that bare minimum emergency fund, which should be pretty easy. Paying off high interest credit card debt should be pretty easy. Having that 3-month emergency fund, pretty easy. And then you've really got some excess cash and you got to answer this question of what do I do with it? So again, I think this person at that point, if you're making $200,000 and you're already putting 10% in your work 401k or 403b, you're close to maxing out your 401k anyway. So you might as well max that out. The limit for 2025 is $23,500. The limit I think next year is going up to $24,500. So you might as well just max out that account and put the full amount in there. So finish maxing out that account at that income level. I think is pretty wise to do what we call the backdoor Roth IRA. You can't contribute directly, but you can contribute indirectly. And so putting around $7,000 per year into a Roth IRA. And then I think any excess money that you have, you really have some options of what to do with it. Usually folks who have that salary usually have some student loan debt. And so if you haven't paid that off, maybe putting some extra money towards paying off that debt. Usually people at that income level may not have a home, but may want a home. And so saving some money for a large home purchase, I think would be wise. If you need to upgrade your car, saving some money to upgrade your car. But if you've already done those things, you've got your emergency fund, you're contributing 10% to your job's 401k, you've contributed to the backdoor Roth IRA. If you've got a little extra, then that's when we start talking about opening up a taxable brokerage account and investing some extra money in that account.
All right, Leisha, I like this one. I agree with what you're saying. I think at this income level, you're going to start to see that you're going to run into some tax problems. So optimizing those pre-tax accounts would be very important. Again, if you have access to a HSA, I would also contribute to an HSA, especially if you have some type of employer match or contribution here. I think it depends on what your situation is, because I'm going to be completely transparent with you all. I make similar to this and I have all of the funds and all of the things coming through my accounts. And And so sometimes I don't bring home as much as you're saying here. I'm also maxing out a 457B actually, but I'm married, so I have some additional income. So you just have to figure out with your partner, if you are married, what is your tax situation and how can you optimize some of those other resources if you don't want to pay as much in taxes. But otherwise, I think that this is a great target for most people who are at that income level.
Not you trying to agree with me. I see you, girl. I see you, girl. Let's keep it moving. All right. Let's say you got a raise, got a bonus, or maybe this is what you started off with. Let's say around $250,000 salary. I think a lot of primary care docs are starting off around this amount. Obviously, it differs depending on what area of the country you're in. But I think this is the income level that a lot of primary care docs are starting out on, or outpatient physicians, or maybe you're not a physician, you're in a different field. But let's say $250,000. At this income level, just like I thought at the last one, putting 10% or maxing out your work retirement account, that's your 401k, 403b. I think that's a really reasonable goal. And so I think putting 10% there, if you're an unmarried person, then your take home pay after you do that will still be around $13,000 a month. And so I think at that income level, somebody could be saving $2,500 in cash each month. Half of that if you get paid every 2 weeks. And so whether it's $2,500 per month or $1,200 every 2 weeks, I think that's a realistic goal for somebody who's making around $250,000. And again, what do you do with that money that you're saving? Building your emergency fund, paying off any high interest debt, doing your backdoor Roth IRA each year, making sure you have money for large purchases. And this is actually in full transparency where I'm at. I'm at the point where I could probably invest thousands of extra dollars per month in a taxable account because I've already done this thing where I'm already maxing out my 401k and the backdoor Roth and all that stuff. But I'm a youngish person and I don't yet have a home. And so for me, it's all right, I'm going to use this extra money that I'm saving per month and I'm going to use it for a down payment on a home or closing costs or furniture expenses. I know I've talked to my friends who bought homes, and even if they don't have to pay for a down payment, there's still closing costs and fees that are associated with buying a home. And oftentimes that's at least $10,000 or $20,000. And then even after that, I don't know anybody who purchased a home that didn't need to repair anything or didn't want to change anything with the home. And so that oftentimes costs money. I drive an older car, so I think at one point I would want to upgrade my car. So just for me, I'm at the point where I'm just probably stacking a lot more money in the high yield savings account or in the money market fund accounts than I probably need to for the purpose of some of these upcoming large expenses. And so some people may be in the same boat, and that's kind of where you are. If you're in a different boat, maybe you're married and your spouse also brings home an income. Maybe you already have a home or you don't desire to live in a home. Maybe you're already married. Maybe you already have a decent car and you're like, you know what? I don't need to save for any large expenses. Then I think you really can put some extra money in a taxable brokerage account or do what you said, Brittany, of considering that 457B account if it's an account that's open to you. That is another pre-tax account that is open to some people that work for large nonprofit health systems. And so if that is you and you have access to that account, considering that account, I'm not saying that you should do it. We did a whole episode on who should consider 457B and who shouldn't, but I think it's something to consider at least. I think a high yield savings account, as you mentioned, is something to consider. And I think a taxable brokerage account where just putting money into a taxable account and investing that money on the side is open to you. So I think at that income level, you have a lot of options, but at the bare minimum, maxing out your work retirement accounts, doing your backdoor Roth IRA each year, building up a full emergency fund, and then deciding, do I need to save for upcoming large expenses, in which case you're stacking money in a savings account? Or do I not need to save for large upcoming expenses and instead I'm just going to put money in a taxable brokerage account and start investing that money?
I love this. I agree with your approach. I also just want to add in a couple of things. So typically when we're saving for those large expenses, we think about, okay, let's protect that money for expenses that we expect within the next 3 to 5 years, right? That's why you're recommending a high yield savings account. I'm going to be honest with you. We didn't think that we were going to have to upgrade our cars. Both of our cars are pretty old, but we were like, okay, we're just going to keep kicking this can down the road. And then we got in an accident. And instead of using our emergency fund, we actually used our taxable brokerage account. You know, we had 6 months in our emergency fund that was in a high yield savings account. And then the remainder, we didn't put in a different account to save for any upcoming things because we didn't expect that they're going to be upcoming, right? We're like, okay, we just keep driving these old cars. And we're grateful that we had that emergency fund, but we also put our money in a taxable brokerage account. And so when that expense came, we withdrew the money from the taxable brokerage account. We tried to leverage whatever tax loss harvesting we could so we wouldn't have to pay all this capital gains tax, but that money is liquid and accessible to you. And so I just wanted to put that out there to those who may not envision that they want to buy a new home or buy a new car or things of that that nature and instead want to invest that money and your plans change, then that money is liquid and you can use it. Now you have to think about what are the tax implications of using it. And you want to think about, okay, when I pull it out, then what does that do to my investment strategy? But that is something that we used instead of getting a loan for the car. We just pulled it out from our investments, understood what the tax implications were, and used that money to purchase a new home. So plans can change throughout. I like your approach, and I just wanted to add kind of that experience that we had.
That makes a good point. It's so funny. I was talking to a financial advisor maybe about 6 months or a year ago about this topic because I had jokingly mentioned that people that I know that are physicians, I'll just say that multiple of them have each shared with me at one point in their life that they had saved over $100,000 in cash. Now, that may seem crazy to some people listening to this, but they had mentioned this to me, multiple people. It'd come up in casual conversation because he has worked with some doctors and he felt like doctors save too much in cash. And he thought, oh my gosh, that's too much. Like, what are they doing? They're losing out on money. And I said, I hear your point. I hear what you're saying, that you feel like doctors save too much in cash, especially maybe the people that I was talking about, how I knew some people who saved $100,000 in cash. But I said, you know what? All of them had a reason for doing so. Some of them, maybe they were scared to invest. And so they just thought that the cash was safer. But all of them had mentioned to me, well, I'm thinking about buying a home. I think I'm going to upgrade my car. I think I'm going to move. I might actually quit my job and it might take me a few months to start back working. I'm planning on having a child and I don't get a maternity leave. So I need to save up for that. They had valid reasons, in my opinion, for saving that much in cash. And he said, well, I still think that's stupid. I still think that people should be investing that money. And then if they need to use that money, then they'll just sell their investments, right? And I mentioned to him, I said, I hear what you're saying, but I don't agree with that. Because when you invest it, yes, over the long haul, it goes up. But in the short term, it could go down. And so if you know that you're going to need money, I think you and I agree on this, within the next 3 to 5 years, I personally think that should be in a safe place, not invested, because if you invest it, it could go down. For some people who put their money and invested it all over the last 5 years, they came out ahead. The market was up and they came out way ahead than somebody who just saved it. But what if you were somebody who started investing in the early 2000s? From the period of 2000 to 2010, they call that the lost decade because literally, if you look at the annual returns of the S&P 500, it was around zero. And so if you were somebody who invested around that time, not only did you not make money, but your investment levels, your money stayed the exact same versus if you would have had it in a high yield savings account or something like that, it would have actually made money. If you had had it in bonds, it would have made money. And so I just wanted to articulate that. And sometimes we suffer from a recency bias. Although recently the stock market has done very well each year, it's gone up. That's not the case every year. And so I would make the argument, and I made it to him, that if somebody needs that money within the next 3 years, I think it should be in a safe place, in a high yield savings account, in a money market fund where they know that their money is safe and it's going to earn a little bit of interest, but maybe not a ton of interest, but at least it will be there for them.
I agree with that. And one of the things that I want to just caution, playing devil's advocate here, since we doing that on this podcast today, right, is that sometimes people get in the habit of saving for a rainy day. They don't have specific goals. They have not really done the projections to understand how much they need, and they get in this habit of just saving cash. So with the financial advisor's perspective, I don't want anyone on this podcast to do this. What Leisha is talking about is creating a goal, maybe actually sitting down. Okay, let me take some time to just imagine what type of car that I want. What is really important to me? Is it having more seats so that I could take my kids or my nieces and nephews or whatever to the park and we can take road trips? Is it having a hybrid vehicle so that I can take road trips, the option, and also save the environment and having some electrical component? Whatever it might be for you, doing a brainstorm and envisioning that goal that you're actually saving for and putting a number with it. So instead of just saying, I'm saving for a house, what type of house do you want and how much does that house cost? What are the investment options? What are the loan options, physicians loans, etc.? And doing a little bit of research so that you're not saving perpetually, but you're saving to meet a goal. And then once you reach that goal, if you want to cushion it a little bit, go, above a couple thousand. Okay. And then start to invest, because to your point, over the long haul, investments are going to return typically around 7 to 10% if you're investing in S&P 500, total stock market, things of that nature. Understanding that you're going to have a bigger return on investment when you actually subject your money to a little bit of risk, but you want to do it strategically and understand that saving for the goal and protecting that money will help you to reach that goal that is really important to you, but don't oversave.
Gotcha. You know what? I can't even argue with that. Let's do one more of these, Brittany. Let's do one more of these. All right. Let's say you're somebody who's making $300,000 a year and up, but I'll just take $300,000 for right now. I think at this point, obviously, this person can put 10% into their 401k. Now, the reason I said about 10% is because if you put 10% in your 401k, you go over contribute. So you're going to have to maybe decrease that percentage because there's a cap on how much you can put into that account. So you might have to split putting some money into a 401k. And then if you have access to a 457B or some other sort of pre-tax account, maybe putting some money in that account. But at least putting my point, 10% into some sort of pre-tax retirement account. And then obviously after you do that, your take home pay might be at least $15,000 per month, if not more. I think that person could probably easily save at least $3,000 to $4,000 a month in cash. And if you are at that point, you can probably have your 3 to 6 month emergency fund. You can do your backdoor Roth IRA pretty easily. And maybe you're paying off any high interest debt if you have any saving for any large upcoming purchases. And then I think at that income level, you should strongly consider putting $1,000 to $2,000 a month in a taxable brokerage account and investing money in a taxable brokerage account as well. I think once you hit the $300,000 mark, I think putting extra money per month in a taxable brokerage account, in addition to maxing out your 401k or 403b, in addition to doing the backdoor Roth IRA, is a very realistic goal.
I agree. I think at this income level, you should be able to max it all out. Okay. What you're going to realize is that you're going to have a tax problem. One of the things to consider is what is your tax strategy here? If you have access to an HSA, definitely you want to be maxing out that HSA because that's going to help you with the tax issue. If you have children, saving for their education in a 529 account will help somewhat with taxes, maybe not as much as maxing out these other accounts. And then thinking about, okay, what type of investments could help me with my tax issue? Because at this income level, you are approaching 30%. And so you're working a third of the year for free. And how can you reduce that, especially if all that income is W-2 income? Now, if you are someone who has, as we talked about in other episodes, a side gig, you have work for yourself, private practice, solo 401k, things of that nature, then you might want to consider using some other type of advanced tax strategies, utilizing a cash balance plan or something like that. You might want to get into some real estate and some alternative investments to kind of help you with your tax strategy. So I'm not going to tell you exactly what to do, but with that extra income, you might want to start conceptualizing, how can I strategize a bit more about my taxes in order to keep more of this hard-earned money?
I agree with you. So maybe you put some of that money and use it for a tax strategist, not just somebody who files your taxes, but somebody who can help you strategize around taxes year round. Our goal is to connect you with people that can help you do that. So hopefully we'll be able to do that really, really soon. Keep an eye out for that. And I think the point here, at least that I was trying to make, is that at lower income levels, it may not be possible to save or invest 20% of your income. And maybe you start with 5% to build that habit, and then you can build up to 10% or 15%. And at the higher income levels, you're probably able to save and invest a lot more than 20%, right? Maybe you can push it to 30%. And so it really depends on what income level you're at. But just know that as you start to make more money, instead of increasing your spending, try to also increase your saving and your investing so that you're continuing to build wealth. All right, we have kind of harped on that enough. Brittany, let's get into some fun money. What is something fun that you were doing with money?
I feel like I'm spending a lot of money recently. Oh my goodness. Okay. One of the things that we are spending for fun money is we're going to Michigan again. You all probably hear way too often me saying that I'm going to Michigan, but my cousin is getting married. And so I purchased some
Ooh,
tickets. Yes,
we
purchased some
love love.
tickets. And not only are we going for a wedding, but we are going to the Detroit Lions football game. So I should probably spend a little bit more time learning the NFL teams because I have no clue who they're playing. All I know is the Detroit Lions are playing, and that's who I'm cheering for. So it doesn't matter who they're playing. But I almost didn't want to go. So this is where me being frugal comes into play because the tickets were a little bit more expensive for a later time on the day of the game. And I was like, oh, Kevin, I don't want to spend this much for tickets. And he's like, Brittany, I think you're being a little short-sighted here. Let's just pay for the flights, like the additional whatever it is, so that we can have a memorable experience with the kids because our kids love the Detroit Lions now. They've never been to a game. So I hope they win because otherwise my kids will be devastated. But we are going to a Detroit Lions game. So we're really excited about that.
Oh, that's great. That's great. You have to let me know what day the game is offline so people can't find you. I'm happy for you. Now, you might have to bundle up because I'm not from the North, but I know it's cold in Detroit. When I was picking out my fellowship program, I didn't apply to any programs in the Northeast because I knew that a part of sports fellowship is covering football. And there was no
Mm.
way I was going to be standing on the sidelines in the cold in the Northeast. So I said, nope, can't do any of those programs. And I feel that same way about going to attending football games in the Northeast. I'm like, yep, nope, I'm a Southern girl.
No, I appreciate you saying that. I need to ask my mother to go. My mother loves to shop. So to go and get us some hats and gloves and all of the things to prepare.
I mean, it might be an indoor stadium. I actually don't know. But if it's an outdoor stadium, definitely talk to your mother in law, get the hookup. All right. For me, I am considering a new iPhone. I know each year around this time, they come out with new iPhones. I have not upgraded my phone in a very long time. In fact, when I was on vacation, my cousins were making fun of me because photos on my phone did not look as good as photos on everybody else's phone. And I'm starting to run out of storage space. They say the iPhone starts to glitch whenever the new one starts to
Hmm.
come out. And it's been a little time. And my family was like, now, Alicia, I don't know how much you get paid, but I'm sure it's enough to afford a new phone. So anyway, when your family starts ragging on you, you really start thinking about it. Well, maybe I should upgrade. And when the photos don't look good for me, I'm like, all right, maybe it's time for an upgrade. Now, the problem is they came up with like 5 new phones. So I don't know. Do I get the iPhone Air, the 17, the Pro Max, the Max? I don't know. So I'll have to figure out which one. But I am considering getting a new iPhone.
Very nice. You'll have to let me know which one you choose. I have also thought about this. My iPhone is iPhone 13.
Same.
Okay, so we're in the same boat here. Yes. So you'll have to let me know how it is. When people kind of rag on what I drive and what I wear and what I have, I say, "Oh, are you going to pay for it?" And that just shuts them right up because no, they're not. And there we go.
Alrighty, people. Hopefully, you found that entertaining, whether it was my Disney adventure or our back and forth on how much you should save and invest on different income levels, or even, Brittany's upcoming Detroit Lions game and my new iPhone. Let us know what you think. Don't forget to rate and review the show. Feel free to email us if you have strong opinions. We read those emails, wealthmindedmd@gmail.com. But hopefully, you found this entertaining and helpful. We can't wait to come back to you again next week.
Hello, everybody. It's me, Brooke. I'm recording a little disclaimer for my mommy, Dr. Brittany Halford, and her friend, Dr. Lisa Taylor. Just so you know, they're not financial advisors, tax professionals, lawyers, or financial planners. Everything you hear is for education and entertainment. It's not strict financial advice, So use your best judgment, chat with a tax professional, and all those other people that you need to talk to. Thanks for tuning in today. Keep cruising on your journey to wealth and wellness. Bye-bye.